Doing something a little different today on the podcast. This episode will come out during Holy Week, so I thought this would be a good time to share my atheist to Catholic story. It's been a long time since I've shared the full story there, and this is going to be, I think, the only time that I have really shared it in an uncensored, unedited way. Every other time I've shared this story, I was either speaking at an event where there were certain things they wanted me to say or not say, or when I wrote my book about it. I have a book about it called Something Other Than God. Or if you're, this is the only version I could find. You can see it on YouTube. It's Krako sam strashman venyo kraslia sreku. I don't even know what language this is, but they put it. This is really the only one I could find to hold up, but it does look like this in English. In Something Other Than God, or Kako Sam Strasvenyo Trax Zila Streku. I'm not even going to try and read the subtitle. That, you know, even then, I mean, Ignatius Press was super cool about, I could say whatever I wanted to say, but it was still like edited. You know, you can't, it has to be edited at some point. So this is the first time I'm talking about why I went from atheist to Catholic. It's just me saying whatever I want to say. Special welcome to the atheist whose Catholic moms sent this to you. I'm sorry. We'll get through this together. I know it's going to happen. I'm so sorry. We'll just listen. I'll hold your hand. It's going to be fine. I could give you like a cheat sheet of like, all right, here's what I'm going to say at the end, so you can tell your mom you watched the whole thing. But if you get any value out of this, here is what would mean a lot to me. If you would sign up for my email list, and here's why I care. Because I'm a stand-up comedian. For those of you who are just encountering me, this is not what I normally do. This is not what this podcast normally is. I'm a stand-up comic, regular old club touring stand-up comic. And the bane of my existence is when I see comments on social media from people saying, Jen, I love this clip. Listen, me and my 28 friends want to come see you as soon as you're in Denver. You just let me know. And the whole squad's coming out. And I'm like, I was in Denver last week. Yeah. It keeps me up at night. Caitlin sees it too. It destroys my peace. I have a little pop-up that I created myself. I'm very proud of myself at jfcomedytour.com. It comes up after like 3 seconds. Like, wait 3 seconds and you'll see it. jfcomedytour.com. And there's a little box there where you can put in your email address, get on my email list, and I'll just send you a note like when my comedy special comes out and when I'm coming to your city. There's also a link in the show notes. So you can look in the show notes and I will have a link to my email list. I would very much appreciate it if you'd sign up. And also please subscribe to my YouTube channel, please, because I have a comedy special coming out soon that I just taped. This material is getting such a good response from all kinds of different crowds. I mean, I was in front of face-tattooed, pink-haired hipsters in Denver this past week, and like they loved it. Like we were having so much fun in that room. So I'm really excited for you guys to see it. It will come out sometime soon on this YouTube channel. So I'm trying to get my subscribers up. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on audio, just search for my name, Jen Fulwiler, on YouTube. If you want to pull up this exact episode, search for Fulwiler 250. That's the episode number. If you search for Fulwiler 250 on YouTube, either this episode will come up or it'll be like 250 reasons that Jen Fulwiler is wrong about that stupid Catholic episode she did. It'll be one of those things. So if you get any value out of this, those are the two things. If you could sign up for my email list and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And when I say value, I mean even like, you know, if you're from r/atheism, you know, like found it there on Reddit and you're like, I'm so glad I'm not her and I hate her so much. And you have that, you know, just real hate watch fun, but still same, like you got some value out of this. So come on, like get on my email list. You would love my comedy shows. Okay. I think those are, yeah. So that's all I had to say. Those were all of my announcements. Again, this is not the normal format of this podcast, but my Catholic fans would be mad at me if I had too much fun during Holy Week. So we're gonna share my conversion story. Let us begin. I was a lifelong atheist. I never thought that God might exist, like not even as a child. I remember when I was 5 years old, this little girl was like, she was like, have you accepted him as your Lord and Savior? And I was like, is she talking about the principal? Like who's him? Like I couldn't even imagine. And my dad, big atheist, loved that story. He was so proud of me. He was like, I'm crushing it at parenthood, that my daughter like didn't even know what this was a reference to. I have a natural mind for atheism. It is still a belief system that I get it. I come from a long line of engineers. Well, actually, okay, this will help you guys understand. My mother was a Phi Beta Kappa honor society math major in college, and she is a retired mathematician. Her first job out of college was she calculated kill ratios at the Naval Weapons Research Laboratory. My father, he was a Green Beret and an engineer. He was a Green Beret in the Vietnam era. So this was not a touchy-feely like, oh, the earth goddess is going to take care of you. Like, there was no spirituality. There was no nothing. Like we were atheists. Or actually, okay, hang on. I kind of hope my mom doesn't listen, because she's always like, don't tell people I was an atheist. Okay, my mother is not and was not an atheist. Okay. She is what philosophers call a Macyist. That is someone who is more concerned with whether Macy's has an additional 30% off this weekend than whether there is a compelling case for a monotheistic God. She was just like, don't care, don't want to talk about it. My dad, he was straight up like, okay, so we didn't own a Bible. There were no Bibles in my house anywhere. There was no religious anything. In fact, when I was 5, we lived in West Virginia, and they had a little thing where the kindergartners could go buy little items like to get for their mom for Mother's Day. My mom will not want me to tell this story, but mom, it's true. It's true. Is it not? Okay. Like I'm a little kindergartner, and this was, West Virginia public school system. So things were a little different over there. And, it was just 2 hands together. I thought the hands looked nice. I thought they were clapping. And when I got them home, my mom was like, oh, these are praying hands. And she actually took me back to school to return what I had gotten for her and like get something else, because this was praying hands. So that's, and then another time, those of you who grew up in the 80s might remember there was a band called the Bangles, and they had a song called Eternal Flame. Their big hit was Walk Like an Egyptian. That was great. That was great fun. But they had a lesser hit called Eternal Flame. And I got a single of that, like a cassette single. And my mom took it away because she thought it was Christian music. So when I say there was nothing religious in my house, I was like, oh mom, I swear I'll listen to Motley Crue. And she's like, okay. Literally, I pulled up a Motley Crue single. I pulled up the Motley Crue single, Girls, 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 with like a stripper on the front. It's like, oh, thank God. And I got the cassette back when I was like, I swear she is just talking about a guy. She just wants to sleep with this guy. It's not anything Christian. Like, I swear. So I was able to get the single back. So not a religious household. We did not have any token Bibles or anything, but we did have this one Bible. It was an heirloom. It was from 1920 or something. And my dad would occasionally get it out, and he would read to me passages and just be like, this is all bunk. And I didn't even know what we were hearing. I'm like, okay, like whatever. I don't know. But he'd just be like, don't like fall into this, because this is all bunk. And my nighttime reading was actually Carl Sagan's Cosmos. Carl Sagan was a big atheist, like just thought religion was so stupid. And so, and somehow he worked that into his book Cosmos a little bit, but mainly like we were big astronomy people. We loved astronomy. And so my dad, that was like my nighttime reading. Sometimes we would do like a Nancy Drew book or something, but my dad literally would like read Carl Sagan's Cosmos to me. And I think it is worth talking about the identity of atheism, because that is a factor here. There is a certain branding around atheism, and this was bigger in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It's not as much of a thing now, but it is a little bit of a thing now. There is a branding of atheism as being for the intelligentsia, and it's almost a point of pride that you feel in certain circles. And, you know, one of our culture's big things is that one of the ways we really value people in this particular culture is intelligence. That's why, like, we're so obsessed with, like, our kids and the SATs and what college they get into and the bragging rights, because that is something that in this particular time and place in history, being intelligent is just like one of the highest things that we care about for whatever reason. And so atheism is kind of a shorthand way to be like, I'm just kind of smart, you know, and sometimes religious people even buy into it. You know, they'll be like, well, I don't think my son will ever believe in God. He's too smart and scientific. You know, I mean, it's out there. And so my dad had some friends. One of them was an astronomer who did some incredible stuff, and he would give me like meteorites that he found and stuff like that. And then and another one was a paleontologist. He found, I think, the biggest intact T-Rex that has ever been found. It was out in South Dakota, and we would have the most amazing dinner parties at the astronomer guy's house. And this was the culture I grew up in, where this guy was so into astronomy and again, like, his paleontologist friends were all these like highly educated people. And his house, get this, Caitlin, this is so cool. When the comedy millions come in, if you're new, by the way, it's funny that you're seeing this like now when I'm poor. I'm about to be so rich from comedy. So I'm going to do this in my house when we're building our mansions. Oh, yeah. Because Caitlin was with me on the come up. So she will share in the wealth. Okay, so this guy's house, he specifically had the architect build it to where it was exactly the right angle to where at the summer solstice, the sun would shine in perfectly through this one window that was next to the front door and hit this one Greek statue of like the goddess of summer or whatever it was. And then at the winter solstice, the sun would perfectly shine in through that other window and hit like the goddess of winter or whatever, some other statue. Do you know how much his builder hated him? Oh, yeah. Like he was like a pharaoh building a pyramid. Like, he didn't care about anyone's peace, or like, it's like, no, listen, this like literally it would be like, where you're nailing that board in, it is 2 millimeters. Like, this is going to screw up the entire solstice. I bet the builder, if I were that builder, I would have been out of town for the solstices. Because can you imagine if like it didn't? I swear this guy, Richard Norton, I swear he would have burned down his whole house and been like, well, you're paying to rebuild this. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, what happens when the house is built and it's not right?
I wouldn't have taken on that project if I were the builder. But it worked. I was never there. So he could have been BSing us, you know, like, no, I swear it's great. Like, he's out there with a flashlight, you know, to make it. And so I in my teenage years, I had the most magical dinner parties at this guy's house, talking about like the Horsehead Nebula, or like what's a quasar, and black holes, and how like, okay, this is, I did hit the tangent, but I'm not turning this into a nerdy, I'm not going to go on a huge tangent, but just, isn't it interesting that time stops at the center of a black hole? Is that, it's a little bit interesting because of the way time is connected to light. Okay, you guys don't care. Never, I'm going to skip that. But that's the kind of thing we would talk about in paleontology, and, you know, this like, you know, whatever, 250 million year old, whatever, dinosaur. It was very cool. The point that I am driving to here is that I very much associated that with atheism. It was like, yeah, I'm so glad that I'm not one of these religious weirdos who can't be curious about the cosmos. You know, I'm just so glad that that, you know, we can actually be curious about like nature and science and all that, because you have to be an atheist in order to do that. And frankly, it made me feel smart. There's another thing about atheism that some of the people who are very vocal about it, which I eventually did become, I do think there is a little bit of an element. A lot of my young fellow atheists, the ones who were real, like they would wear the Richard Dawkins, like shirt. That was so silly, that era. But, they were very, like, really wanted everyone to know they were atheists. I do think there's a branding issue there, that it's like a lot of these kids were highly intelligent, like crazy smart, but had trouble showing it on paper. Their grades and their academics were not reflecting their true brilliance for whatever reason. And I saw a high correlation between people in that situation and atheism, that it was like they felt very frustrated. They wanted to be valued for their intelligence. And one way to signal to people, especially in the culture of like the early 2000s, but to some extent now, was to be like, I'm an atheist. You guys know I'm so smart. I'm too scientific for the fairy tales, like the flying spaghetti monster. Had you ever heard of that, Caitlin? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, all that. Like it was a way to be like, I'm so smart. And I was pre flying spaghetti monster, but we would have loved that if I had heard that when I was an atheist. So I grew up. Actually, we moved a lot, but I went to most of high school in rural Texas. Does not make you super popular to be from an atheist family. I also when we lived in Dallas previously, I had very bad experiences with Christians. Like the kids would like call me a Satan worshiper because my family didn't go to church. Which is amazing evangelization. It really made me curious about their religion. I was fascinated. And there were just all of this like comedy of errors moments where I was trying, at first when we lived in Dallas, I was trying to like not let it be known that we were not religious, because like in the 80s in Protestant Dallas, you just could not. And I remember sometimes I would go to Sunday school with friends whose houses I slept over at. And as much as my parents were worried about religious indoctrination, they did not want to get up early. So they would be like, you can just go to church with your friend. But all this stuff happened. Like, so we'd go to Sunday school and the Sunday school teacher would be like, oh, we have a new friend. Where does your family go to church? And I'd be like, yes, the First Church, and I would just try to, like, I don't know, pull the fire alarm or just do something to like get them to stop asking me questions. I will never forget this. I was at Sunday school with my good friend Erica Miller from a good Baptist family, and I was relatively like new, like I was a new friend of hers and really wanted to fit in. I didn't do a good job of fitting in. I was always bullied. I was always an outcast. And I was like, okay, this is my shot. I can have friends. Just watch. I'm going to act like I'm religious. It's going to be great. This Sunday school teacher, she was like, we are going to play a game, a Bible game. Again, you have to understand, I knew nothing about the Bible. Like, beyond nothing. My dad had read me a couple passages, but like I did not even understand the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. I had as little exposure to the Bible as an American possibly could. And so she put the names of books of the Bible on cards. And she said, so we were each in teams. So like it was a team, 4 teams and a few kids on each team. And she said, we are going to have a contest to see which team can get all of the books of the Bible first, in the right order first. Do you might think that you have known terror in your life. Somebody might be like, I survived a plane crash. Stop. Just stop.
No.
You don't know terror until you are the atheist outcast kid who's like trying to have a friend here, trying to not be an outcast at this school too. The Sunday school teacher turned to me and she said, why don't we let our guest go first for her team? And these other kids are like, if you screw this up, like, you guys, these cards could have had Chinese characters on them. They meant nothing to me. These words meant nothing to me. They were not familiar at all. And she's like, okay, go. And my team's like, all right, Jenny, go, go, go. So here was my thing. I had logic. I had logic, Caitlin. I did. There was a logic. Okay, so I was like, revelation. That's like the word, like reveal. You're revealing things. So that must be first. That's probably the first book of the Bible. I had heard of the books Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I'm like, I bet they're at the beginning because people usually kind of read like the beginnings of the book. So I did Revelation, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Yeah, any names I recognize, like Ezekiel, like I was like, I bet they're introducing characters. I get it. So it's like Matthew, Ezekiel, like whatever. And then Numbers I put at the end because I thought it was like an index. I was like, okay, Numbers, put that at the end. My team lost badly. They hated me so much. And at the end, the Sunday school teacher kind of leans down and whispers to me, where did you say y'all's family goes to church again? Horrible. And then I was like not invited back. So this was my experience with Christians. So I became more militant in my atheism. And that part of that was honestly on the Christians. Like some of them were really pretty annoying and pretty horrible to me. So by the time I hit college, I started college at Texas A&M, and there at the time there were like 72,000 students at Texas A&M University, and I was the only atheist from what I can tell. I think I was the only one out of 72,000 students. So I was the target of all of their evangelization efforts. And it's interesting. So I had a roommate, Allison, her last name is now Stivers. And what's interesting is we were both engineering type women. And we often said that our brains were like identical. I mean, the way we were both very like kind of linear thinking, science minded, but she was like a really serious Baptist and I was an atheist. And we would actually talk about it quite a bit, that like, how do we have such fundamentally different beliefs when we're both like these engineering minded people? But, it's like you're Baptist and I'm atheist. It's weird. And this was commented on a lot, kind of an interesting postscript, totally independently of me. She is now Catholic. She converted to Catholicism. So it's funny that we both had this like same kind of mind, totally independently. We both became Catholic. But anyway, but some of her little Baptist Bible study friends would come over and evangelize to me. And like, I wish we had tape of it as an indictment of the public school system. We were all so uneducated. It was so uneducated about like philosophy and theology that it was wild, because they would be like, Jen, aren't you burdened by the shackles of sin? And it would be like, hey, clown, like I don't believe in sin and I'm a better person. Like my atheist family is like, they're better people than all you guys. Like we don't need a book to tell us what to do. And I was like, oh, that's such a great point. Like high five self. But what's funny is these Protestant Christian kids, they'd be like, that is a great point. And I remember I would hit them with this is like, we have to fix our public school system, because I would be like, I'd be like, wait for like, this was my real mic drop moment. I'd be like, you know what? If there's a loving God, why would he allow suffering? And I'd sit there and I'd be like, I'm the first person who thought of that. No one's ever thought of that before. Going to take care of Christianity right now because no one's ever thought of this. But these Protestants would be like, nobody's ever thought of that. Like, that's such a great question. She's destroying us. And it was the blind leading the blind. None of us knew anything about history. We didn't know anything about philosophy. And the idea that I'd fallen into, which is where like we need a little bit better education for our kids, is that in a good form of education, one of the first things you learn is how to think, how to evaluate the world. What I mean by that is anyone with a classical education, which I did not have and these kids did not have, has an understanding that you use different disciplines to evaluate different questions. So, in the error that we have fallen into in the modern era is that every single question, always, ever, should be evaluated by the scientific method, which is so wild and silly. You know, if I'm like, hey, does your wife love you? Like, can you explain to me, like, why do you think your wife loves you? You don't say, let me run down to the lab and get my beakers and my Bunsen burner. You know, like that is not a question that should be evaluated by the scientific method. And by the way, all of the founders of like what we call the scientific method today, they were all believers and most of them were Christians. So that it's funny that like there's such like everyone really fetishizes to a bizarre degree. Like, I don't believe anything that can't be proven in a lab. Like, really? So if someone's like, you know, do you love your mother? You're like, let me get out my spreadsheet and show you that I love my mother. Like, not numbers and science are not meant to prove everything. And you shouldn't use science to evaluate everything. And by the way, there are things that can be true and they can be objectively true that can't be proven by the scientific method. And ask Newton, ask Galileo, who, yes, never lost his faith despite the fact that he was beefing with the Pope all the time. You know, ask any of those guys who's like, who's the other? Okay, the name is not coming to mind, but really, like, just look up any of the guys who really started this scientific method as we know it today. They were all believers. Like because they understood that there are some truths like, does God exist? Questions like, does God exist? Why is there something instead of nothing? Why does the universe exist at all? Is it objectively good or bad to like kill someone who didn't do anything to you? These kinds of questions were never meant to be evaluated in a scientific laboratory, even though they do have a yes or no, right or wrong answer. But that's what I fell into, is just this idea that we have to evaluate everything through science, which looking back is like, what a bizarre way to live, to think that way. And it struck me, it did kind of start to feel a little weird because I remember one time, okay, so I left A&M solely because it was too religious. That is the only reason I left. I liked A&M. I came from an old Aggie family, but I was like, I cannot be around these religious people anymore. So I transferred to the University of Texas at Austin, which is where I graduated from. And man, I got onto the streets of Austin, Texas, and I was like, atheists. Yes, this is what I'm looking for. I love it. It was a perfect fit. I loved it. But I remember I was on a bus heading into campus, and I read that this professor, I want to say he was in the Pacific Northwest, or maybe that's just like a stereotype that I have in my mind, but he said that it would be more ethical to kill a newborn baby, that like it would be more okay to kill a newborn baby than it would be to kill an adult pig, because pigs are more intelligent, and in the way we assign value to the different life forms on Earth is intelligence. He and his defenders, it wasn't just him, but they went on to say, like, you know, the reason we feel okay killing a gnat instead of like a, you know, whatever, like we'd be more okay killing a gnat than like a ferret or something, just because they're more complex, like cognitively. They're more cognitively complex. And that line of thinking had always, in any time we got in ethical discussions with atheists, it was like, yeah, okay, that makes, yeah, cognitive complexity. Yeah. That's how we know that like we're more valuable than like a mouse or something. But then when this professor said that, it was like, intellectual honesty alert. That's okay. This is troubling now because it's like, well, but an adult pig is cognitively more complex than a newborn baby. So, and what does that say for people who are like severely mentally disabled? Like, are they less valuable than people, you know, than like the galaxy brain people, you know, asking these questions? And I started to see there there were some real concerning ethical implications of the purely atheist materialist answer to how do you assign value to life forms if you're totally an atheist. And that kind of stuck with me. I was like, gosh, I really feel like as I'm eating my bacon that I can sort of justify this morally, sort of, but that is an interesting question about cognitive complexity and human life and value, and like, I almost became vegan. I mean, it was close. That was a rough, and I dodged a bullet there. So I was a big atheist and a loudmouth atheist. And I mean, I actually convinced a few people to stop being Christian, which sucks. But that's sad. Like, obviously that sucks. And I hope that they have found their way back to the Lord. And I shouldn't have been able to, because I didn't have any good arguments. Like, I have better arguments for atheism now than I did then. So they, hopefully they were like, wow, that was really dumb, everything she said. So I continued in that vein, super atheist, graduated from UT, got a job. I was a programmer at a high-tech startup. And this was during the dot-com boom, which you guys know, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, I do not romanticize the past. I think everything is better every year. But I will say the dot-com boom was kind of fun because there was a bubble and it was like everyone made way too much money. And it's like, oh, our 25-year-old CEO says that we should throw a $40,000 party because we only missed this one milestone by 2 weeks. Like, it was great. It was that was actually kind of fun. So I was working as a programmer and atheist and happy. And a lot of times people say that atheists must feel like something's missing. I really did not. I was going down to 6th Street in Austin and partying, and I finally fit in a little bit for the first time in my life. I fit in the tech world and made probably more money than I should have. And I was honestly perfectly happy. I was actually, things were kind of fine. I was very set in my atheism and probably would have stayed on that track, except I met the guy who would now become my husband. He's my husband of 20 years now, 22 or whatever. I can't do math, guys. I'm trying to tell I value my marriage. I just can't, whatever. It's 22 years almost. So I met him at work. And this is when you tell your story, people come out of the woodwork with this revisionist history. Joe doesn't like for me to say, okay, he wasn't my boss, but he was higher up on the org chart than, okay, whatever. He doesn't like that line of discussion. Okay. So, I met him at work, and I was very impressed with him because I was just out of college and he had this like crazy education that he had just finished. So he's a few years older than I am. So he was like ahead in life. And I didn't know much about him except for the fact that what I would eventually find out is, okay, so he grew up very poor, very, very poor, raised by a single mother. I mean, they were so poor, they could not afford to run the heat in the winter. I mean, it was Houston, so it was, they're all right. But I mean, so like his mom, my mother-in-law, she literally often did not know if she could afford to like feed them dinner. I mean, that is how poor they were. And she was a single mother starting from when he was age 4. And she had to work 2 jobs. He would clean office buildings with her in the evenings, and like at his sports games when he played baseball or football or whatever, he often didn't have anyone there to root for him because he was his mom's only child. His dad wasn't in the picture. She was estranged from her family, so everyone else would have people cheering for them, and he did not have that. She told him that the way to get out of poverty was to go to these schools that she had mainly heard about on TV, like Yale or Harvard or whatever. And he was like, okay. So he ended up going to Yale. He graduated in 3 years with honors. He went to Columbia Law School and then worked at some very prestigious firms in New York, like in the World Trade Center and all of that, like very, very difficult firms to work at. He did corporate law, and then he decided he didn't like that. And so he went to Stanford Business School. And like his mother was pulled out of school to work the fields. Like I don't think she finished high school. So when she drove out with him to Stanford, she kept asking him if this Stancliffe place was reputable, because she'd never heard of Stanford. And she was like, I just don't know why you didn't go to a school that's like a real school. I just don't know if Stancliffe is going to give you what you're looking for. So I met him after that. So after Stancliffe, he came to work at this company, and I was very impressed with his education. And I was also impressed with the fact, I asked him, I said, wait, did I hear that you're a lawyer? Because he wasn't working as a lawyer. He was working as a, not my boss, definitely not my boss, guys. He was like the director of operations or whatever. And I was like, did I hear that you used to be a lawyer? And he said, yeah, but I just hated the corporate like law life. Like I wanted to have a life, and I just didn't want to work that hard. And it's so funny because now, fast forward 22 years, nobody wants to work less than me. He does not want to work. He's like so done. He's like, Jen, we got to get the Comedy Millions in here because I'm so sick of like, I just want to sail. So, when you phrase the single people, the first thing you notice about someone when you meet them, you're going to get more of that. And I would have never guessed with his background that the first thing I noticed about him was that he was like, I just didn't want to work that hard with the law thing. And I've gotten more of that. Like he's like, I hate being a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer at all. So anyway, so I was very impressed with him. And by hanging out with him, he and his personal friends, and then the other guys in the department I worked in, everyone went to an Ivy League school. I was the only one who did not. And it was the dumbest stuff. Like we would go to these shishi Austin Ivy only parties, or they would call them Ivy plus. And I remember this other guy who also went to Yale with Joe. Joe wasn't part of this, but he and a Harvard guy were sitting there, and they were really wringing their hands about, should they let MIT people in? I mean, it's Ivy, and MIT is not Ivy. It's like, this was the culture that I was in. And one thing I started to notice about all of these guys is that none of them were atheists. And the more I got to know Joe's my husband. And so the more I got to know him, I was like, surely he's an atheist, because can't say that guy's not smart. Like his mom had not heard of the SATs. She didn't know that they were like, that was important for getting into college. He just sat down, like took it cold and got almost a perfect score. Yeah. So like, I mean, I think you can probably use the word genius with my husband. I mean, he's a smart dude. And, so I just assumed he was an atheist, because atheism is for the intelligentsia. And at one point, I guess, okay, so at this point we were dating. We had started dating and did not tell anyone at work. And it was like a while before I realized that he considered himself a Christian, which was so strange to me because he was not practicing traditional Christian morals. But I didn't see him pray. He didn't go to church. I mean, there was like nothing like that. That's why I thought he was an atheist. But he said something interesting. I said, why are you like, that's so weird. And he said, well, when I was 13, he said, I was baptized in a full dunk, like Baptist baptism. And he said, when I came up from the water, I encountered something. He's like, I encountered someone, like I encountered Jesus. And he's like, I know that I did. I know what I know. Like I know what I experienced there. And he's like, nobody will ever tell me that Jesus doesn't exist, because I know what I encountered. And I was like, God, this is so weird. Like, does he do drugs? Like what is going on? So I really didn't know what to make of that. But so he was like, yeah, I don't go to church or like anything, but I would never say that Jesus is not like who he says he is. And I was like, I don't even know who Jesus says he is. So can we stop talking about this? And so I did this big deal thing where when we were getting a little more serious, I said, well, I am an atheist, and that is like, my family's culture. And I just want to make sure that you are going to be okay with me, being an atheist if this relationship goes any further. And he was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I don't think you'll stay an atheist. I'm not worried about that. I found that very insulting. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to double down now. I was like, are you, what? And he was like, no, you'll figure it out. And he just had this attitude. He's like, look, God exists. And like, if you're even a little bit curious about like anything, you'll figure it out. Like, so he's like, he did not take that seriously at all. Like he did not feel like I would stay an atheist, because he had this connection to God that again, you would not know just talking to him. I mean, he was just a executive at a tech company, but I guess just deep down inside, he was like, I so know that God exists that I don't have to get wound up about this. I did stay atheist though for our wedding. I don't, again, this is not a normal podcast episode, but my regular podcast listeners know that it's very surprising that I didn't get an extreme neurodivergence diagnosis earlier in life, because my wedding was the most insane and neurodivergent thing that anyone has ever seen. But the point that I bring up with this is that I was such an atheist when we got married that I did not want to have any religious elements. And then I was really big on intellectual consistency and intellectual honesty. That was one of the things that my dad raised me with that has to this day served me very well, meaning like, think through the things that you do. Think through the ideas behind them. Make sure that they are consistent with what you believe. And so, for example, like the idea of having bridesmaids, it's like, well, the tradition behind that is like for eligible women who are not married to be viewed by the community and, potentially get married. I was like, none of my friends want to be married. They all want to be like tech executives. I'm not going to throw a bouquet. I might throw a book like How to Succeed in Business, and like whoever catches it is going to get a promotion. But I very obstinately, I just wouldn't. Okay, so I wouldn't wear a white dress because I wanted to prove a point that we were not following any Christian traditions. I wore a dark purple dress. It was basically a prom dress, and because I had to make a point, we did not have wedding cake. We had bags of candy. I was like, I'm not doing wedding cake. So I didn't have bridesmaids. I had no bridesmaids, like at all. And we didn't have cake. I wore a dark purple dress. We wrote our own vows, but we were in a real party era. And so we just partied too much, and to like rehearse it. And okay, so the guy who, you can skip ahead a couple of minutes if you don't care about this. The tangent alert, hit the tangent alert sound effect. Okay. The guy who like was our MC is the best-selling business author Keith Ferrazzi. He wrote a famous business book called Never Eat Alone and Who's Got Your Back and all that. So he's a friend of ours, and he didn't marry us because I had a big thing that I was like, I refuse to get married by like the state or a religion because like they can't tell me if I'm married. So like we just went down to the justice of the peace to get it legally taken care of, and we didn't rehearse it because we were going to, but then Keith got invited to this wild party that I think, okay, Keith, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have used your full name. Keith, I really hope he's okay with me saying this, but okay, there was a stripping contest that he got roped into. It was probably against his will. Okay, he's a very, I shouldn't say this. Okay, he's like a very high dollar, like very famous business speaker. So let's say, maybe I'm making that up, okay? Maybe Keith Ferrazzi was not in a stripping contest that meant that he was busy when we were supposed to be rehearsing our vows, okay? I'm making that up, okay? It didn't happen. And maybe he wasn't like livid that he came in second, and instead of like talking over our vows, he definitely did not want to have a roundtable discussion about like, look at these abs, like are these second place abs? Sorry, Keith. But it didn't. No, I'm just making that up. That didn't happen. But we didn't rehearse our vows. They ended up only being like 6 or 7 minutes long. They looked much longer on paper. So we had people who literally flew in from all over the world to like watch this 6-minute ceremony. And what I'm trying to provide you with is my atheist street cred, because online atheists are always like, she was never really an atheist. I had the most ridiculous wedding that literally anyone has ever had, because I was that much of an atheist and I was that anti-Christian that I just wouldn't do anything that was associated with Christian traditions, because I didn't like Christianity and I wanted to have an atheist wedding. So that was my atheist wedding. Now, other atheist weddings are not like that. They read the Khalil Gibran poem, like we're not going to eat from the same loaf, like we're going to cut it in half, even Steven. Like, they read that. It's other atheist weddings are nice, but mine was just weird. So so that I went on that tangent just to tell you, like, that is how seriously I took this. But I did, the first thing that shifted for me was just, okay, atheism is not for the intelligentsia, because this guy, like, the more I got to know Joe, the more I was like, hey, he's smarter than I thought he was, like, even than like on paper. And the fact that he could have that belief, that's when I started to kind of realize, okay. So there are some things that could be true that don't necessarily have to be proven with the scientific method. And I would meet friends of his who had like the most insane pedigrees, you've ever heard of. It's like Harvard undergrad, Princeton this, and biomedical engineering honors major with an MD and a PhD. I mean, and this is, that's not an example. That is someone he knows, like MD, PhD, multiple PhDs. But like they would go to church and they were Christians, or a couple were Muslim or whatever. So it was like, okay, well, I can no longer say that like you can't be smart and have faith, because I don't know how it works, but these people are really smart, and a lot of them have faith. So I don't know how this works, but it seems to work. So then we had our first kid. Fast forward. I am an only child and my husband is an only child. Joe had never held a baby before our baby was born. I had only held 2 babies ever in my whole life when my kid was born. And for those of us who are living at the tail end of a demographic collapse of their family, I mean, like I said in my last comedy special, like my family tree was becoming a stump. I mean, it's there was my father was an only child. I mean, I wasn't raised around babies or new life or anything like that. I didn't ever have a friend who had a baby in the house. Like I never had a friend who had a sibling younger than like 8. Never. I moved a lot, so that might be part of it. So anyway, for those of us who come from that kind of culture, it is hard to describe how foreign babies are to us. Like I really think in the back of my mind, I had forgotten what they taught us in health class. And I thought that new human life came from a cloning room at the back of Starbucks. That people come into the world at age 22 with glasses and a latte. Like that's just what I was not around pregnancy or babies, like ever. I cannot even describe what a shock it was when my first kid was born. I had 2 younger cousins who I had helped out with and I had held when they were babies, but I was like 14. I had not, let's see, I was, when my first kid was born, I was, I don't know, late 20s, 27 or something. I had not held a baby since I was 14. And even then it was like one time when I went to visit my aunt. Like it is just impossible to describe what a shock it is to have a baby. It would be like having an alien, it's like, what? Whoa, crazy. So, that was the death knell for atheism for me. That's when I was done, because the love that I felt for my child and for this new little family that we had, I was like, yeah, it is objectively true. This love is real. This love is real and it's true. And I think I'm probably on the spectrum, guys, because I'm not kidding. I had an editor ask me if I was mentally ill when she read the first draft of Something Other Than God, because I really did stare at my little newborn baby and I would be like, okay, let's be intellectually honest. What is this baby in a purely atheist materialist worldview? And I'd be like, oh, what a precious little randomly evolved set of chemical reactions that came from nothing and will return to nothing. Like, she was like, I think you need to cut that. Like, people, this is just turning into a book about mental illness. I can't remember if that's in the book, but it's true. It's true. That is how I thought about it. And I try to be objective. I try to not let emotion factor into my thinking. That was a big thing in my household. Again, mathematician mother, Green Beret engineer father. No, we don't. Emotions were not, like, we kind of didn't believe in them. Like, it wasn't. So I was like, all right, maybe this is like pregnancy hormones or something. But the more time went on, I was like, no, I think this love thing has an objective source. And I think that, like, even if the whole world blew up tomorrow and we were all gone, I feel like this love would somehow still exist. Like, it's connected to something like on a different plane than the space-time continuum, like it's just connected to something further out there. And that moment was painful or uncomfortable because it was a big hit to my ego. Again, I came from a culture where you are valuable based on how intelligent you are, and the more intelligent you are, the more atheistic you are. And so it was like, am I becoming an idiot? Am I becoming just like the stupidest? Like, this is embarrassing. But I just couldn't shake it. I was like, yeah, I think maybe there are objective truths that just can't be proven by the scientific method, that you might have to like explore a different way. And I think I'm not an atheist anymore. Now, I didn't know what to do from there, but I was raised in Bible Belt Protestant culture. So from cultural osmosis, I knew a little bit about spiritual stuff, and just, being an American, I probably did have a bias towards like Christian ways of praying. I didn't like get on my rug and face Mecca, and so because I came from, America is a largely Protestant Christian culture. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try saying a prayer. I'd seen it in Hallmark movies. I'd seen it done. So, but another thing, the editor was like, are you okay? And by the way, this editor was not even religious. She was a Jewish woman. She's like, this is just very strange, all of this. Cause I wrote that, I was like, I had all these questions about how would one distinguish between talking to oneself and talking to whatever deity or being might be out there. Like, is there an on-off switch? Is there like a mic? Like, is this thing on? Like, how do you, like, but and this is what we talk about this on the podcast all the time. Am I insane or am I just logical? To me, that's a fair enough question. How do you know when you're going from talking to yourself or talking to the like invisible deity that's like, you don't, I think it was a fair question. I still think it's a fair question. So I didn't know what to do. I was like, okay, if any being or beings, plural, just anything really, like if anything is out there and wants to let me know about itself, I am now open to it. If you would like to, do that. And I said amen because I had seen it on TV and absolutely nothing happened. And which was very disappointing because I had seen the Hallmark movies and I just thought, well, maybe like a bird will land on the balcony of my, loft and like with a message. Like, I don't know. But I thought if God cared, he could like help me out, and nothing happened for days and nothing happened for weeks. And I was like, well, at least I can take the God might exist thing off of my to-do list, because I had that minute of open-mindedness, but now but I still wasn't an atheist. I was like, I do think that this love has a source outside of the chemical reactions in the human brain. I started to think of it as like, our physical bodies are like a radio that receives a transmission, but it's like the transmission is not generated from within the radio. It's just like receiving it. But I was like, okay, so maybe there's just some like impersonal force of love out there. And I also started reading. I read quite a bit about Islam. I read a bunch of books about Islam, and I hit all the major religions. And of course, Buddhism. I was living in Austin, Texas. It is required by local city ordinance that everyone dabble in Buddhism for at least 3 months. Like, you just have to, and you can go see your Buddhist, like a Buddhist monk named like Connor or whatever. Like that's Austin, Texas. So yeah, I was just sort of dabbling in Buddhism, and it sort of made sense. I mean, Buddhism is a somewhat, atheistic sort of religion, but I was going to kind of layer that love element on top of it. I don't know what I was going to do, but I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm just kind of a vaguely, spiritual person, and that's fine. What I didn't understand is that when you turn to God, when you reach out to God, it's not like he's not like a magician who pops out of a box and does a laser light show. Think of it this way. And here I'm kind of talking more to like the atheist people than I am the Catholic. These people who listen, like most of my fans, like they've been believers their whole lives. So they just already knew this. But so here I'm kind of talking to the people who are like seeking. Why doesn't God just pop out of a box and like do a laser light show for you if if he wants you to know him? It's similar to, okay, imagine that two people and you really want them to fall in love, like real love, like lasting, like not a fling, not a Tinder, quick situation. Like you want these people to be celebrating their golden 50th anniversary together. You want this to be a true, deep, lasting connection. Well, the minute, let's say their names are, what are some good fake names? Sam and Caitlin. Sarah. Okay. Sam and Sarah. See, they both start with S. They were meant to be together. Okay. So let's say you've kind of laid the groundwork, and you tell Sam, hey, there's this girl, Sarah. And let's say one day Sam's like, well, I don't know, but I might be open, I don't know, to maybe going on a date, or at least like meeting Sarah. How weird would it be if you're like, hang on, let me get out FaceTime, and you're like, meet me right now at this restaurant, and you have like a violin playing there and rose petals all over the table and like a priest there in case they want to get married on the spot. It's like, we're talking about love. We're talking about relationship. And if you were trying to set these people up, you would play it slowly, because that is how lasting relationships develop. They develop slowly. It would be weird as heck if you, again, like set, like the minute Sam says he might be interested in Sarah, you throw them you get them a table at French Laundry, and you've got like a violinist playing their favorite song. Like that, it would be too much, and it would be too weird. And then here's the other thing that I've come to see is your relationship with anyone, God or anyone else, like it shouldn't be based on signs. And so if God had like sent, a beam of light into my downtown loft where I was living, and like some doves flew in the window and they're like, become Christian, or like, I don't know, like whatever. I mean, God's God. He could do it if he wanted to. One, I'd probably just think I was on acid. But two, let's say I didn't think I was on acid. I'm like, that's definitely from God. Then what is that relationship based on, guys? It's based on like signs. There's no real intimacy there. And so next time I'm kind of feeling distant from God and maybe having some doubts, it's like, well, now I need another talking dove. Now I need another beam of light. And it's very analogous to like, if you've ever known someone who was very insecure in their relationship and they only believed that their husband loved them if he had to buy her candy, and then, but he didn't buy me flowers last week and he did this week. That's a relationship that's based on signs. It's based on the laser light show and all that. And like, God wants so much more for you than that. He doesn't want you to get addicted to signs. And for those of us who are maybe a little on the spectrum and have trouble being intimate with people who are invisible, and I do have some feedback for God on that one. I think that it would be helpful if, it's hard for those of us. Like, you can't see him, But I do want to encourage you. It actually is possible. And it takes a while, but it is possible to have an intimate relationship with a being that is invisible. So that is why when I said that prayer, God did not instantly, hit me with like an explosion or whatever, because he wanted more for me in this relationship than for me to be like the needy girlfriend who has to get flowers 365 days a year or she doesn't feel loved. And also like it's never enough and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So months went by and I hadn't thought of this anymore. So I was at a Barnes and Noble with my son, who was probably, 9 or 10 months old at that point. I cannot remember why I was down south, but it doesn't matter. I was in South Austin and went into a Barnes and Noble, and across from me at the other end of the store, there was just a book that I had to see. Very strange moment. This was a big store and I could not even come close to seeing what book it was. I couldn't see what section it was in. It was just a strange thing. I was pushing my son's stroller in the door. Way at the back wall is just this tiny square. And I was like, I got to see what that book is. I was mortified when I saw that it was the Christianity section. Mm-hmm. Mortified. Again, the brand of atheism. Like, Christianity is for idiots. Like, I was like, what if someone saw me here? This would be so embarrassing. I'm dead serious when I say that. I would have been mortified if I ran into anyone I knew. And like the last time I was in the Christianity section of a library or a bookstore was in the 4th grade. I took all the Bibles out of the Christianity section and I moved them to the fiction section. I was like, I'm the edgiest 4th grader anyone has ever seen. And I lived in the Protestant South, so it was like, oh, she is the edgiest 4th grader that anyone has ever seen. So I was horrified to be in the Christianity section. I'm sorry, regular podcast listeners know we have a poltergeist store here. Every time I try to do a show, there is some insanity right outside the store. Caitlin, and you don't need to crawl under the camera. No, nobody cares. Nobody's listening at this point. Like, the Catholics already know. They're like, yes, right. The atheists, they're out. Okay, so it's just me. Guys, don't worry. Don't feel bad for me. I'm used to shouting into the void. That is this whole podcast. Okay. So Caitlin is dealing with the poltergeist noise outside our door. So the book was called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And you know what I found interesting about it was just that I did believe he was an atheist. Well, actually, I should say, I saw on the back that it's about a guy who was an atheist. He went to Yale Law School. And he was the legal reporter for the Chicago Tribune. And so the book is about how he used his legal, like, investigative mind and eventually became Christian. And the main thing I thought was interesting was that I did believe he was an atheist based on how he wrote his little introduction. Because I had, at Texas A&M and other places, people had given me whatever, like pamphlets or books by like former atheists. These guys, it was like, it would be like, I felt so weighed down by the shackles of sin that I had to turn to our Savior. And that's what it's like to be an atheist. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, no. But this guy, the way he talked, I was like, okay, I mean, I don't know why, like, he was like smoking crack or something and became a Christian, but I do believe that he was an atheist based on the way he talks about this. And the book was like, look, I'm probably not going to convince anyone, but whatever, just here's some evidence. One of the things he said in the book, it reminded me of something Joe had said, when I first had my I'm not an atheist anymore moment, I said to Joe, I said, well, it's, I want to be open-minded. So like, obviously I wouldn't like just jump right into Christianity. I mean that, I come from a culture, like American culture is heavily Christian. So that's just so obvious. I should start with some other religions. But I'm not sure where to start. And Joe said, I'll never forget this. He said, how about this? It just seems like if you want to save yourself some time, you could start with the only religion that has lasted, that has a founder who claimed to be God, and the religion is still around. And it took me a while to connect with that advice, but what he pointed out, and Lee Strobel said something similar in his book, was like, cult leaders do this all the time. They're always like, I am God. Isn't that crazy? Yes, creator of the universe. It's me. Crazy. But then they make the very ungodlike move of dying and staying dead. And their cult members are like, maybe it wasn't him, And Joe was like, there's not another religion whose founder claimed to be God, and then it like stuck around. And Lee Strobel said in his book, he's like, look, you guys can, like, here's one thing that is indisputable. If you look at the history of the Jewish people, just constant persecution for thousands of years. And they had certain religious and social institutions that they held to despite unspeakable persecution, despite being captured and sent to other lands and all this stuff. They kept these religious and social institutions, like doing the Sabbath in a very specific way, and just an animal sacrifice and all this stuff. Like they kept it going when some of the most powerful forces in the world spent a few millennia trying to get them to stop. And then, and again, this is Strobel's point, you see this guy from a lower middle class region of the Middle East come up, and he's got this ragtag group of lower middle class followers, and he's like claiming to, be God, and he'll heal people and stuff. And he gets on the wrong side of the authorities, and he is executed by crucifixion along with like 30,000 other people that year. The Romans were big on that. Lots of people were executed. That was not super abnormal to execute people by crucifixion. Pretty unremarkable story. This just lower middle class guy and his buds were going around, and he gets crucified. But then, shortly after that, you see waves and waves and waves, thousands upon thousands, like this mushrooming, this geometric growth of these Jewish people giving up these religious and social institutions that they had held to for thousands and thousands of years, all because they said they saw Jesus risen from the dead. Like, that's what triggered all of this. And he's like, look, there are theories out there of like secular explanations, and that's fine. You can believe those theories of why Christianity spread like such wildfire, despite the fact that it was a persecuted religion. It was not a high status thing. It wasn't a conquering religion. It wasn't a religion later, some things went off the rails. Like a few hundred years later, things got a little crazy. But like initially when it was spreading, it was not spread by the sword. And in fact, the sword was going toward the Christians. Becoming a Christian was a death sentence in a lot of places in early Christianity. And so Lee Strobel he said, look, you can do a secular explanation here of why this disliked religion that was associated with the lower classes and had very little social power and very little military power initially. You can explain all day long, like how that happened socially, just from a secular perspective. But could I just get you to think, like, for 1 second, that maybe the simplest explanation is that they really did see this guy risen from the dead? That would actually explain a lot. That would actually save you a lot of mental acrobatics of why all of these Jewish people, and then non-Jewish people as well, just started abandoning everything to go be persecuted and die for like being Christian. I mean, it's, that's a valid, like, well, maybe they did see him risen from the dead. And because I was in this new mindset of like things can be true that, aren't like, you can't prove in the scientific method. I was like, okay, maybe. That was a major paradigm shift for me. That was really major because that was the first moment that I thought maybe God exists, like a personal God, like you can know the guy, and maybe he did make himself incarnate, like maybe he did become a guy. That thought had never even come close to crossing my mind. I was 28 years old. It had never crossed my mind. And so I wasn't like converted or anything, but I just thought, okay, interesting. So I bought the book, and I was so embarrassed to buy it that I loudly asked for a gift bag, because I was like, but it's for a friend. This is dead serious. When I was checking out, I was like, I will need a gift receipt. It's for my friend. She's a Bible person. Pity. So I did. I got a gift receipt. Of all the things, I so wish I still had that gift receipt because it's so funny that I felt like I needed to ask for that. So so I was like, all right, well, this is interesting. And again, cultural osmosis. I was raised in evangelical American culture. I did know, I'd heard of the Bible, with that putting the books of the Bible in order. I mean, I'd heard of the thing. So I was like, I guess I need to get a Bible. I thought there was just one, I thought that like I would go to the Bible section of the bookstore and it's like the Bible. There's the women's Bible. There's the teens Bible. There's like, I did not know where to start. So I chose the one that looked least like a Bible. I found one, it didn't say Bible on the cover. And I was like, this is what I'm looking for, because I was so embarrassed. So again, I bought it. I also loudly asked for a gift receipt. I'm like, it's for my grandma. They're like a little bit senile. So you guys, I cannot possibly emphasize this. People, a lot of people just don't understand how isolated a person can be from the Bible. Like people my age, I think, don't get it. This is happening more and more with kids who are being raised today. But I was really on the cutting edge. I was on the first wave of people who, when I say we knew nothing about the Bible, I mean, it just wasn't studied. Like I went to public school, so Lord knows we can't learn about religions, ever. And I went to public university where, you could opt into religion classes, but of course I didn't take them. So I did not know the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. It was a book. That's all I knew. I'm dead serious. That is all I knew. So I started reading it from the beginning. And I thought, like Jesus is the main character, so he must come in, 30% of the way through. Like I wanted to be a writer, so I knew, you introduce the main character, pretty quickly. Have you ever gone deep in the Old Testament? It's so crazy. You guys, it's so crazy. And you have to understand, like, I'd been to Sunday school and we sang songs about fishermen. It's like we call the fishermen. I don't know. I actually don't remember the Sunday school. There was like, I forget. But I sung a few Sunday school songs with my Baptist friends. And it was like, oh, the fishermen. And like, I was in Deuteronomy and it's like, and they killed thousands by the sword and their babies. And I'm like, where are the fishermen? This is so, what? Where is Jesus? Like, what is going on? And so meanwhile, Joe was like, he was like, I told you wouldn't be an atheist for long. But he was like, yeah, so you'll figure it out. But he was raised in like Bible literate culture. And so he did not understand how much trouble I was having. But I think it became clear to him, like when he would come home from work and be stressed, and I'd be like, oh, you know what you should do? You should take a piece of yarn and hyssop and dip it in bird's blood that's in a clay pot. That's what you should do. Because the Old Testament talks about, or no, wait. I wouldn't have said Old Testament because I didn't understand. I was like, you should take some yarn and dip it in bird's blood in a clay pot because it's in the Bible. Like that's what you're supposed to be doing. So he got very tired of that and was like, would you please go to the New Testament? So he explained the New Testament is where Jesus comes in. And I was like, oh, good. This will make it all make sense. The New Testament starts with a list of names, and like I couldn't pronounce half of them. Oh, by the way, I wrote this in my book. I was like, it's all these names, these like, those weird like Old Testament names. And then when I went to read the audiobook, it took us 45 minutes for us to read that passage because we had to look up the pronunciation. I hated myself so much. I was like, can we delete this? Is it already in print? Like, can we delete this paragraph? Fully 45 minutes to look up how to pronounce every single one of those names. And now, like, if I ever write a book again, I'm not writing a whole passage where I just list all of these crazy things that I cannot pronounce. So anyway, I was like, this is just a whole mess. Like, I didn't know what I was reading. Like, okay, it's all right. So yes, we're like, okay, so Jesus, yes, I see this. But it's kind of like if you eavesdrop on a conversation of a group of friends that like, you don't know them at all. I just didn't know what I was reading. And so people were like, okay, so at this point I had started a blog to ask internet Christians questions because I was further enough in that I was like, okay, I need some people to answer some questions. So I had this little free blog website. And I asked Christians, I was like, the Bible is, I see, okay, Jesus was like, he healed some people. Like, I'm sort of following this, but, I'm just not getting it. And they're like, oh, you need to get a Bible concordance. And then also like some commentary and, all these other supplemental books. I was like, do you guys have jobs? Does anyone have a job here? Because, so at this point I was pregnant with my second child and I had a toddler, and I'm like, in what world do you think that I have time to become a personal like scripture scholar in order to learn the most basic things about this religion? And then here's the other thing. This was the big thing. I was like, this system that you guys are telling me about, where I become an expert on scripture, because I would ask them about a passage and they'd be like, oh, that sounds crazy, but actually you have to understand it in light of this Old Testament passage. And I'm like, you guys, I do not have time for this. Like, I don't have time to read the entire crazy Old Testament and the New Testament and like understand how it all goes together. Like, that's PhD level work. I do not have time for this. But here was the big thing. I said to myself as I was looking over this, I was like, this religion is bunk. Like this, you know what? Scrap Christianity, because this system that they're telling me about, like the Bible and me, where like I just read it and figure things out, it requires the printing press. It requires widespread literacy. The printing press was first like out there in the 1500s. And it didn't really take off like where you could really widely print things for like another 100 years. Widespread literacy. I mean, today, the world literacy rate is only 80%. And when we say literacy, we're counting people who can read a sign that says stop or go or yield. Like you're considered literate if you can do that. But if you want to do the percentage of world literacy of people who they might not have the mental capacity or the educational background to comprehend what they're reading, that can't be higher than 50%. And honestly, I'd be surprised if it's 50%. To be able to read something complex and internalize it and understand it, that really takes not only a high level of education and at least a mid-level of intelligence, but it also you have to be kind of schooled in it. You have to have a very highly literate background where you did a lot of reading. And so I'm like, this system where I just understand everything about the Bible, just me sitting in my room, it requires the printing press, because before the printing press, every book was hand copied. So a book would cost you, like for the average peasant, I mean, that would be like more than a year's wages to own a book. And even then, because it was like monks copying it by hand, even then, a lot of them, they just weren't available. So I was like, I mean, the average person before, like, let's call it 1600, it just wasn't, you couldn't own a Bible. And even if you could, you probably just didn't have the education and the experience with developing high reading comprehension skills to be able to really, deeply understand what you were reading. So, I went on my blog and I was like, guess what, guys, Christianity is false, because this is just not a good system. Like, this is just not going to work, at all. And, what's interesting is a couple of people stood out to me. A couple of people on this blog stood out to me. I had, because I was getting tired of some of the silly answers that people were giving me. There was a big atheist website. It was the biggest one on the internet. It was called The Raving Atheist. You might have even heard of it. This was like 2005, 2004 era. And he helped produce a documentary called The God Who Wasn't There. And he would just trash Christians, say sacrilegious stuff all day long. And there was a group of Christians who did a great job arguing with atheists in the comments. And I recruited them. You could email them, like find their info through the comments. And I had selected about 4 or 5 of them. They knew science better than the atheists. They were more linear thinkers than the atheists were. They understood human evolution, archaeology, paleontology, they reminded me of like my dad's astronomer friends and the paleontologist friends. And they were just demolishing these atheist arguments, just making mincemeat of them. So I had recruited those 4 or 5 guys to come answer questions on my blog. The spoiler alert, they were all Catholic. The people who I had designated as like these guys, like they're embarrassing the atheist arguments. They were all Catholic. Not everyone on that site commenting was Catholic, but the ones that I had hand selected. And craziest postscript of all, and I have, oh please, okay, look, this is when we find out if God exists, because I am really hoping I have something very cool to show you in my Google Docs. Did I copy paste this? Oh my gosh. Is this it? Okay. No. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm going to look for this, and if I think I have it somewhere. The guy who ran the Raving Atheist website, who was in the documentary The God Who Wasn't There, he became Catholic. And somewhere, okay, I'll find it. I screenshotted his blog when he did the announcement. You want to talk about breaking the internet? When the Raving Atheist, the most popular atheist blog, when he announced that he now believed in God and was Christian, and again, that eventually he became Catholic. I mean, you've never seen an internet meltdown like that one, and I have a screenshot of it somewhere. Okay, so we're back to where, like, I'm reading the Bible, it's a mess, and I'm like, this requires the printing press, it requires literacy. None of this makes sense. So these guys who I knew certain of them, like Steve G is a guy who was one of them, and I had just kind of gotten to know them because I was very, very impressed with their intelligence and their knowledge. And Steve G and these other guys, when I told them this problem, they were like, okay, just hear me out. They were like, and again, I didn't know their branch of Christianity. I just thought all Christians were kind of the same. And they were like, okay, hear me out. What if? what if before Jesus ascended to heaven, because he went back to heaven, what if before he ascended, he founded a church? What if like he designated one guy and a couple of guys and he gave them his own divine authority to keep this one church going? And what if that church was kind of like how in the US, you know, how we have the Constitution, but we have a Supreme Court that like when there's a disagreement about what the Constitution says, it's like there's a Supreme Court. He's like, what if he gave us a divinely guided Supreme Court that could like speak his truth, not their opinions, but like it would be divinely, like it's his, you know. And what if he promised to stay with it for the end of the age, until the end of the age, and like, and what if, you know, he just like kept it going. Like he took these imperfect people, just like he did with the writers of the Bible. Like the guys who wrote the Bible, they were not sinless people. They messed up. They were idiots. Like they were jerks, whatever. But God used imperfect people to write perfect truth when he inspired the writers of the Bible. What if he didn't stop doing that? What if he kept using fools and idiots and bad people and whatever and good people and just, you know, the whole mix of humanity to inspire these imperfect people to convey perfect truth? And that's, you know, that's how you can know his perfect truth. And that's how you can even know like what books of the Bible are legit. How do we know that those early guys chose the right one? Well, because he divinely guided this group of people that he called a church, and like that's how we know. And I was like, I like it. That's so yes. Like, oh, that explains so much. And they were like, that's the Catholic Church. And I'm like, oh, come on, stop. Like that's this anti-woman, horrible, corrupt, terrible organization. And when I told Joe, like my Baptist raised husband, because he was the only thing we had in common religion wise when we got married is that we were both anti-Catholic. Like that is the only religious view that we agreed on. He was like, okay, you've been messing around with these internet people. Now you're messing around with Catholic internet people. Like this is just getting out of control. He's like, you've got it. Catholicism is a bridge too far. Like you got to stop. And I was like, you know, well, but okay, but I felt like there was something to this Jesus guy. But what I had seen from American, you know, evangelical culture is that everyone was like, well, we agree on the big things and we can disagree on the small things. And it's like, yeah, but you don't. you don't. Because like this Build-A-Bear system that I saw in American Protestantism, where like you just kind of, you build a bear Jesus to be whatever you want him to be. Because like the Jesus who is like, guys, really whatever works for you. Listen, have that late term abortion, like euthanize grandma. Like it's whatever is in your heart. Like I'm good with it. Like really whatever you want to do. That's a different guy than the guy who's like, oh, guess what? You have to love and respect every single human life, like from birth until natural death and from conception until natural death. Even if it is a huge pain for you, you got to do it because that's, you know, what my love looks like. Those are two different guys. Like that, it's not the same Jesus. And what I had seen from mainstream Christian American culture was like, they were just giving me different Jesuses. You know, they're like, Jesus loves it when you trip shrooms. And like my ayahuasca shaman is like, he's just like Jesus. It's like, you guys are, this is Build-A-Bear. Like you're just making stuff up and calling it Jesus. And as an atheist here, like or a former atheist or whatever I am, like I'm just trying to get a really simple question of who Jesus is and what the hell he stands for. And you guys are like not able to answer this for me because everyone has a different version of this dude. And I was like, so this Catholic theory, that would be really interesting if like he founded a church and if God didn't stop using imperfect people to convey perfect truth, he didn't like shut off that switch at like 33 AD, like no more, I'm never going to take imperfect people and inspire them to perfect truth again. That would kind of make sense that God kept doing what he does. The other thing is I was like, once I understood the structure of okay, well, this was a big thing. The other thing that the Catholic internet people explained to me was the idea of the Eucharist, that God made himself, that the communion that you receive at a Catholic Mass, that they believe that it's like actually God, like literally his flesh. And then that the readings from the Bible are read aloud at every church. And it's not like the local church's choice. It comes from this very clear, like universal church. So and this is true today. Like if you're sitting where I live in Austin, Texas, you are doing the same reading as someone going to a Catholic church in Nigeria or in Japan. Like it's all, you go through the Bible sequentially together, and it's read aloud in a very specific way, so that every 3 years you will hear the whole Bible at church. And I was like, oh, see, in my little on the spectrum brain, it's systems, because I'm big on systems, and I'm like, that's a system that makes sense to me, because the fact that it's read aloud in a very systematic way, that is how illiterate people could get to know the Bible. You wouldn't have to own a Bible. I'm like, okay, well thank you. Okay, so that's how they did it before the printing press, because I was wondering, oh, I see. It's read in a systematic way, so that if you go to church every day, and Catholics always have daily mass, it's 365 days. Okay, so you would hear, if you could go to church every day and you'd hear the whole Bible. Okay, I get it. So that's how illiterate people with low reading comprehension, whatever, that's how they did it. And then the other thing that it explains, the Eucharist, I was like, that makes so much sense. I had zero struggles as a lifelong, like, atheist materialist. It was probably the easiest theological concept I came to, because it's like, it's so visceral. The idea of eating, eating, like physically encountering God. And it's like, let's say you're someone, your brain is not an analytical brain. Like, let's say you wouldn't do super well on an IQ test. Like, it's just intelligence is, let's say you have a little bit of a mental disability or something. Maybe you can't fully understand what you're hearing in the Bible all the time. But the Eucharist, like encountering divine, like God's divinity in something that is very physical in that way, anyone can understand that. It's very understandable. And flash forward, as I've been Catholic many years now, there have just been so many times when I took little kids to mass, and they were being so bad, like just so, I'm like, what are these feral children that I found outside? What is going on? And I didn't hear a word of the scripture. Like, it was just madness, but I could receive the Eucharist. I could have a physical encounter with God. And I'm like, God, that was such a good idea. Like, really, every now and then I do give God the gold star. I'm like, there are a few things I would have done differently, but that one, oh, genius. So such good work, God. It makes so much sense. And so when I heard this theory, I was like, this actually explains everything. That this is the system that, illiterate people with low intelligence, just, yes. It also explains how we know we got the right books of the Bible, because that was a question too. It's like, some people say, oh, the Gospel of Thomas, like, that's a legit. And it's like, well, yeah, God would have to keep inspiring some additional people other than the guys who wrote the books of the Bible, because there were a lot of writings at that time about Jesus. So how do we know which ones are legit? Well, those guys would have to been inspired who chose the books of the Bible. It explained everything. Now, Joe, again, Protestant, was like, this, no, because like the Roman Catholic Church, like, it's very corrupt, and like the mass is like all this pagan stuff. So here's something that I found very interesting. I'm putting on my glasses here to look scholarly. Oh, great. And now I lost my document because I was looking for okay, here we go. Let me read you somebody describing the Mass. Okay. It's this guy, Justin. All right. I think this is a good, if you've ever been to Mass, like with your Catholic friends, this is, okay. So he's like, we don't, like, what we consume is not bread and wine. it's our Savior. It's Jesus Christ who became man and flesh, and by the power of his word, the food that we are eating, that looks like bread and wine, is actually the flesh and blood of Jesus by his power and by his own words that are contained in the prayers of thanksgiving. That's a pretty good, like this guy, Justin, he's doing a good job. Okay. So, and he's describing the Mass. He says, on Sunday, we have our members assemble and, we do the readings. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. And then we, let's see, the priest speaks to us about virtue and what we just heard in the readings, and then we all stand up together, and let's see, the Eucharist is distributed, and there is also, let's see, a part where, okay, this is a second guy writing here, but he's describing the Mass, and he's like, he says the presider says, "Lord be with you," and we say, "And with your spirit." Caitlin, you visited Mass with Caitlin's not Catholic, by the way, so this is a welcoming podcast. So this sounds familiar to you, right? Like, the Lord be with you and with your spirit. So this guy's describing it. Lift up your hearts. We lift them up to the Lord. Let us give thanks to the Lord. It is proper and right. And then, the priest holds up the cup and says, "This is my blood, which has been given up for you." So does this sound familiar to everyone? Google Docs is killing me. It's killing me. No, you know what? No, there is no God. There can't be, with the way Google Docs is treating me today. Okay, so the first thing I read from this guy, Justin Martyr, you can tell how his life worked out by his name. He was born in 100 AD. So what I read to you, here's what, I changed a few words, but when he's like, he says, and this is a direct quote, so he was writing to Emperor Antonius Pius and Marcus Aurelius. You've probably heard of Marcus Aurelius. Well, you've probably heard of both if you study history. But so they had heard that the Christians were cannibals because they heard about them eating flesh and blood. Yeah. And so, but it's because of the Eucharist. And so they misunderstood. And they're like, oh, sorry, guys, but we're going to have to kill you all because we're not into cannibalism. Like, that's not our thing. So Justin Martyr was like, no. Okay, so what he said is, he's like, on Sunday we have a common assembly. Here's the part I like. He's like, he says, the memoirs of the apostles or the writings of the prophets are read. He was writing this so early that the Bible as we know it did not exist. So they called it the memoirs of the apostles. Like, they would literally have some scraps of paper. Like, okay, this is, Mark, you guys know him. He died 20 years ago. So these are like we're going to read what Mark had to say. And so they literally just had these like collection of papers, the memoirs of the apostles. It would be like if you printed out someone's blog post, like, yes, like this guy, like John 8632 on the internet, on Reddit said this. Like, it'd be literally like if you printed out someone's stuff and was reading it. It was so early on that's what they were doing. And so these guys, you've got, and then the second thing I read, that was Hippolytus. He wrote that in the year 200 AD. But there's another Saint Ignatius of Antioch. I think he was he fed to the lions or, well, whatever. It didn't work out well. I'm pretty sure he was fed to the lions for saying this, but he's talking about there is one flesh of our Lord Jesus Christ and one cup in the union of his blood. And he was born in 35 AD. There's a great book that you guys should read. It's called Four Witnesses. Don't email Caitlin and be like, what was the book that Jen was talking about? I believe in you guys. You can remember this. It's called Four Witnesses. Type it in on Amazon. And it's these guys who lived like right after Jesus ascended to heaven, and they're talking about the Eucharist. They're defending themselves against the emperor that, no, we're not cannibals. It's like, but it's not a symbol. They're like, it's not a symbol. We are consuming the flesh and blood of God, but it is like, don't worry, we're not cannibals. So they were trying to explain it to him. And I pointed this out to Joe. I was like, I mean, if something got like corrupted and the Catholic Mass is like corrupted, it must have happened like the day after Jesus returned to heaven, because there are very, very, very early writings where these guys are very clearly describing the Catholic Mass as we know it today. And I went to a Mass, and it was so interesting because I've always loved history. And I actually brought the writings of Justin Martyr, like writing in 90 AD, with me. And it was crazy that I could follow along with this Mass in Austin, Texas. This was the year like 2006. And I could follow along with the Mass based on what this guy had written in like 90 AD. And it was this cool moment. Like, I've always felt connected to people in history, and I've always like dreamed of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you could like go back in time? But I always thought, oh, I'd probably be like killed as a witch because like I wouldn't fit in, and I'd be dressed differently, and I wouldn't speak their language. But it occurred to me when I visited this Catholic Mass, I was like, if you're Catholic, like, you could get in a time machine and go back to any time in the past 2,000 years. And if you could find a church, it would be the same Mass. You wouldn't, like, the Lord be with you and with your spirit and the Eucharist, and all, like, it would be the exact same thing. And I also noticed, like, in the Bible, like when Jesus said, the exact translation is like, you have to gnaw on my flesh to have life in you. It's like, you must eat my flesh to have life in you. It says like a bunch of the guys left. They're like, that's super weird. Like, that's so awkward. And he didn't stop them. He wasn't like, oh no, it's a symbol. Like, you don't literally have to eat my flesh. Like, he let them go. And so I just saw that, like, the Eucharist, it made so much sense. And they were talking about it from day one. They were getting accused by the emperor of being cannibals. Like, I was like, okay, so I think this is like it. Like, I think this is like, I think this might be it. And let me pause it. Caitlin, we have some kids that, no, you don't have to pause it. Welcome new podcast listeners. This is a very informal podcast. Do we have pickup for these kids?
Nope.
Well, I think we do. Can you, Caitlin, send a group chat? Yep. It's going to be a long episode. Sorry, I should have run this by you. I didn't know how long it would be. Are we good for another few minutes?
Should be.
Okay. Just, send that text about, we have some kids that need to be picked up. Joe was actually starting to get interested in this, and he was like, it's funny that he and I struggled with different things. Like, he was like, the Catholic thing with Mary is very weird. Like, they're too into Mary, and it's weird. I had beyond zero struggles with that. I was like, I thought of everything I'd learned about the universe, like astronomy and, everything. And I was like, so the being who created all of this, all of the Andromeda galaxy and all the stars and the planets, like in this galaxy, it's that being chose his own mom, like, and not a mystical, like a goddess who's out there in the stars, like a mommy, like someone to, kiss his knee when he has a scrape. Like, the one who created all that chose his own mom. And I remember I looked at Joe, I was like, that honestly, I would, if I had thought of this, like when I first believed in God, I was like, whatever religion most values Mary, that's the one I'm going to convert to. Because, like, if God chooses his own mom, there is just no way that whatever religion is like the one that's closest to him, that they wouldn't have like a major, place for Mary. And it's okay. Should I do this tangent? Oh my gosh. Okay. Quick. Okay. Listen, quick tangent, hit the quick tangent. I promise I'll keep it quick, but so Joe was talking about all the bad things that the church was doing that led to the Protestant Reformation. And I do think, this was I love history, and this was the history loving part of me, that that's true. If you read about what was going on right before Martin Luther was like nailing things to church doors, it was bad. It was. Now, Martin Luther also was read what Martin Luther thought that you should do with disabled babies. Just search that. So he had some issues too. The church had some issues. It was a mess. Everyone was a mess at that time. I do think it's important for everyone to understand that when the Protestant Reformation happened, that was about 100 years after the Black Plague. See, this is this podcast, guys. We're in the Black Plague. I'm sorry, but the Black Plague was the 1300s. And there were some really, really, really good clergy during that time, like nuns and priests and bishops and all that. And they were some of the only people who would help people with the plague. The church was decimated decimated is what? Killing 1 out of every 10. It was whatever, like killing 9 out of every 10. That's what happened to the clergy in the Black Plague. And so kind of like, honestly, like anyone could sort of be in the church in the early and mid 1400s because like everyone else was dead. And it wasn't like the best people. And then they would bring people into the church who were not the best people. And so, yes, the church was a horrible mess leading into the Protestant Reformation, but you do have to factor in the Black Plague. That's all I'm saying is like the church got completely wiped out during the Black Plague. And it was still in a little bit of a rebuilding heading into the 1500s now, and it's still a mess today. So that was another thing, all the scandals and, you know, the horrific things that have happened, and even just the annoying things. Like, how many annoying Catholics do I know, Caitlin? In fact, I was talking about a certain group of them before we went on the air. The Catholic Church is such an absolute dumpster fire of people. Now, I will say the finest human beings I have ever met are Catholic, like mystically amazing. Like, there was this, God rest his soul, love him so much, at Mount Angel Abbey. He was a Harvard classics major, and he was a priest at Mount Angel Abbey. Actually, there's the guy who was head of the seminary at Mount Angel Abbey. I don't know if he still is, but he had a master's in, I think it was nuclear engineering, and he was a Catholic priest who was like head of the seminary. Probably the best people I've ever met are like priests and nuns. And so the best people I've ever met are Catholic, but there's, there are some people that, I know I'm not supposed to wish ill on anyone, but I have like half of my enemies are Catholic, you know? So when we look at like what a mess the church was in history and what a mess it is today, I mean, in a way, in my mind, it almost like advocated for, the truth of it. Because corrupt idiots who are narcissists and just want personal power, they are always the first one to sell out to whoever is like in power, to be like, yeah, you know what, we'll change our teachings. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like, what, you hate Mary, we hate Mary, like whatever. And they never did. And the church kept saying the same thing, even when it made people like really mad and was really unpopular. And so it was weird. It's like the more you advocate for like, this is a dumpster fire group of people who are, many of them are like bad people. It's like, right. But then how is this institution? It's the longest continuously running cohesive human organization in history. How do you do it for 2,000 years with this ship of fools? You know, like, how do you do it? Because again, the more you make the case that the people in the Catholic Church are disasters, it's like, well, right, but then why didn't they sell out to power and crumble like every other empire? Like all of these empires, the Roman Empire, like all of these empires faded away, and the Catholic Church won't go away. It's still there, and it's still making people mad with like saying morality that people don't like. And it's been doing this for 2,000 years. And it's like, I mean, you kind of look at it like it's different, you know, it's different. This one cohesive organization, it's like in the same place and everything. And like, it just hasn't changed. So, in 2007, both Joe and I became Catholic. We got Joe eventually. We did get him. Hit the applause button. But usually, you know, we became Catholic. The big one is, okay, I'm going to see if I can hit 2 hours on this. So Caitlin, don't worry. I'm trying, but there is, I just can't tell you the story with that. This is the big one. I swear God means for like my life to be like a sitcom or something, because the Catholic Church's stuff with women was, I had some interesting thoughts on that, because I never had an issue with the male priesthood once I understood that the Catholic Church it's a family. And so the priest stands in place of Jesus. So like all of these feminists who are like, we need female priests. It's like, you guys are such communists. Not everything is a job. Okay. Not everything is like in the workforce. Like a priest is not like a factory worker. He is standing in the place of Christ. That's why, like, when you confess your sins, you're not confessing to the priest. You're confessing to God, and he's just the conduit. And so it's like if I were to be out of town for a long time, because like the Comedy Millions are here, and like my big comedy special, is coming out, and like I make millions from it. Like, let's say I had someone stand in my place as a mother, it wouldn't be a man. Because this is a familial role, and it's like having a woman and that maternal energy matters. And so I never had any issue with the male priesthood. That once I understood that the church is a family and these are familial roles, and the bishop is like, your uncle, and the priest is like, that's why we call them father. Like I was like, I get it. That it makes so much sense. And for someone who doesn't have a lot of extended family, I felt very taken care of by God. And in fact, this whole thing developed of like, I feel so taken care of that I can go to this mass and like, I don't have to like bring my Bible. I can just listen. Like if I'm holding a fussy baby, I can just listen to the readings, and I can encounter God physically. Even if my mom brain is like not working today, I still have that physical encounter of the Eucharist. And now I have this family, because that's what the church is. It's not a factory where people go to work, and so all the genders have to be equal. It's like, it's a family, and I have a father in the form of this priest, and a mother in the form of Mary, and all the nuns that are like associated with my church. And so it was like, okay, like I feel very taken care of. But I was very pro-choice. I donated money to Planned Parenthood. I was super, super, super like pro-abortion, all that. I didn't know you could be pro-contraception. I just thought that's like, to every responsible person uses contraception. Like, what are you talking about? So when I heard that, this was the last sticking point, because the pro-life thing bothered me, and I just thought, I was like, contraception, like some people are anti that. Like, are they Amish? Like, what cult am I involved in here? Okay, if I went into the whole thing, it probably would be another hour. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes on the contraception thing. So because God wants my life to be a sitcom, right when I made the decision, like, yep, let's be Catholic, I was diagnosed with a blood clotting disorder that makes pregnancy very dangerous for me. And somehow it's rare. It's called factor 2. Nobody has factor 2. Some people have factor 5. Factor 2 is very rare. I inherited it from both parents, and it's rare. So I don't know if there's something my parents needed to tell me about, like they met at a family reunion. I don't know. But it's crazy that I have both copies of the factor 2 gene. So it makes pregnancy very dangerous for me. And I got a deep vein thrombosis, a really serious blood clot in a major vein when I was pregnant with my second child. And so all of the doctors were like, okay, well, obviously you have to get sterilized, and like there's just no discussion. And my first was a boy, my second was a girl. And so they're like, look, you have a boy and a girl, get sterilized. There's actually nothing to discuss here. This is something you have to do. And the Catholics don't teach that you have to have tons of kids, but it is like, don't use contraception. And so when I told them that, and also don't get sterilized, that's another Catholic thing. And so when I was like, hey, I'm like messing around with these online Catholics, and I think I might even become Catholic. And I think not only am I not going to get sterilized, I think I'm not even going to use contraception. The disdain that they had for me was like, they were like, this is the craziest thing we've ever heard. And I was like, it does seem like I'm kind of the poster child of the church has to make exceptions, right? Like, come on, this is not the medieval, like, let's be real. Then something interesting happened. So I had to be, after my second kid was born, because of the DVT, I had to be on an FDA category X drug. If you conceive a child while you're on this drug, you will the very, very, very high likelihood of severe birth defects. You cannot take this when you're pregnant. And I had to be on it for quite a while. And so I was like, well, this is exactly, I mean, I don't know. Maybe this isn't God's church. Because like God can't be wrong. And if something the church teaches is wrong, then this is not from God. It was interesting to find out that every single Christian denomination was against contraception until 1930. And then some of them Build-A-Bear their way. They're like, this sucks. Like, and then they changed. And in 1960, in the 60s, everyone thought that the church was going to change too, because every other Christian denomination had said it's fine. And so they were like, all right, we just need Pope Paul VI was going to speak on it. And they're like, okay, he'll come around, like Catholic Church, always late to the party. And when he released Humana Vitae, which is an official church, like inspired teaching document. And he was like, no, contraception is not good. And he specifically said, it's not good for women. It's not going to be good for women. Women will be used and treated as objects and all that. And so that was another like, man, it's just crazy that this church is like not falling in line with what the culture wants it to do. So I thought that was interesting that every Christian denomination had opposed it until the 1930s. And I found a forum online, and I can't remember which forum it was. This was 2006. And a gal was in my similar situation. She was taking the same drug I was. And she said, I'm Catholic, because I Googled that drug and Catholic. And she said, I'm Catholic. And it just seems like I just don't know what to do, because like we don't really believe in contraception, but I'm on this FDA category X drug, and I just don't know what to do. And so everyone was big feminists in the comments, and they gave her a big feminist talking to, and they're like, the men in the Catholic Church, like they're so anti-woman, like they don't understand your body, your choice, they're just so terrible. So just take contraception. And she was like, thanks guys, girl power. Yes, absolutely. Interesting, hit the interesting statistic tangent sound effect. According to Planned Parenthood's own Guttmacher Institute, that is their research arm, a woman taking a contraceptive method with a 98% effectiveness rate over a 10-year period, she has a 70% chance of experiencing an unexpected pregnancy. 70% chance if she takes a 98% effective birth control over a 10-year period. This is Planned Parenthood's own research. A guy named John A. Smith did that study, and it was published in a publication called Family Planning Perspectives. Contraception is not, it doesn't tend to work out well in real life and in actual use, especially over long-term periods. So this gal, I'm watching in this forum. So I scrolled, because what I was reading there was like a couple years past. So she's like, thanks guys, girl power, yes, the men in the church can't tell me what to do. And then I clicked to the next page, and she had come back a few months later. And she said, we had a contraception failure. We were being super careful, but something happened. She said, I'm pregnant. Now what do I do? And these people, these quote unquote feminists, were like, oh, well, you just have to get an abortion. And that's it. That's all they had to say about it. And she didn't follow up. I don't know how that story ended. I don't know. And I sat there and I stared at that. And I was like, my entire generation of women and my mother's entire generation of women, we have been at war with our bodies. And I always felt that. And I know a lot of women felt that. And it really didn't seem like my grandmothers and great grandmothers, like I knew people born in 1914. I talked to someone born in like 1905. And it really didn't seem like they had quite the same level of angst about being women that we did. Like that angst just like wasn't there. And I was like, maybe a lot of the angst that women experience in this culture is because we are told that in order to be a normal, healthy person, you have to be out there engaging in the act that creates babies. Let's not forget here on like Instagram, OnlyFans, Tinder culture that everybody remember how babies are conceived? Yes, it's through that. Yes, the thing that you see on the crazy videos on, that's how babies are made. And women are told that like, you're weird if you don't engage in that. Absolutely. You got to be out there all day, every day, engaging in the act that creates babies. But we've been told it makes just total sense to engage in the act that creates babies, even if you are in absolutely no position to have a baby. Does anyone see how that could cause a lot of tension? And when I thought of like, so many of my friends had abortions, and it was like, all of them, they felt really blindsided by it because they were like, I was doing everything my culture told me to do. Like I was playing by the rules. I was using contraception. Like one of my friends in college, just nobody told her that antibiotics can make the pill not work as well. And she was sleeping with a guy who was a jerk, and like she didn't want to have any kind of long-term relationship with, but that was within the parameters of like girl boss culture. It's like, yeah, you can hook up with a guy. Like I read an article one time, this woman was like 10 things I learned in my 30s, and she's like, sometimes it's fun to sleep with a guy who you're afraid might steal your wallet. And it's like, okay, but do you want to have a baby with a guy who might steal your wallet? That kind of tension of like engaging in the act that creates babies with people that you don't want to create babies with, or when you're in a position where like you can't have this, it doesn't actually leave women feeling like they have a lot of choice. It makes women feel at war with their bodies. And I realize like, yeah, I mean, if you're like, I'm on an FDA category X drug, like we cannot, like, I would not want to conceive a baby, then this is not an easy thing, but you're going to have to go a while and not engage in the act that creates babies. And this is a very, very difficult teaching, and it's inconvenient as hell, and like it sucks, but like it dawned on me as I read that forum, I'm like, the Catholic Church it's not anti-woman, it's actually the only one that's willing to tell women the truth. It's the only institution left that is just speaking truth. Like, look, that contraception it doesn't always work. And like, you are going to be absolutely like at war with your body if you buy into this culture's idea that you can engage in the act that creates babies with these contraceptive methods that are notoriously ineffective, when you're not at all ready to have a baby. And also interesting postscript, when they were like telling me about sterilization, I was like, well, what if a drug came on the market that like I could take during pregnancy and would be safe? And they're like, well, that wouldn't happen. You need to get sterilized. It did. There is a drug now, by the way. So that the sterilization, just like John Paul II called it culture of death culture that I was being pushed into, it was such a hopeless culture, just like no hope for the future, no hope for anything. So anyway, that I am going to have to skip, just for time's sake, I am going to have to skip the specific, like also how I came to change my mind on the abortion issue. I'll just tell you this, look up Stenberg versus Carhart and just see what the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists advocated for there. Just read some of that literature, and it will make you realize that it just made me think in an entirely different way about the abortion issue, and just how much people can like be blinded to what's really going on. And again, I have no judgment for anyone who's had an abortion. So many of my friends have. My aunt has. I mean, many people have. And I see how they get there, and I see how the culture, I absolutely see how you end up there. So I have no judgment for anyone who has been in that situation. But, like when I started to look at it, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but I will say this. Typically in history, you're on the wrong side of history if you are on the side that is advocating for the withholding of information. And I was this pro-choice feminist, but I would advocate for no, you should not offer for women to see ultrasounds. No, there should not be literature in abortion clinics that talks about fetal development and that babies can touch their faces at 12 weeks or whatever. No, you don't want that. And I realized I sounded like I was from Victorian England. It was like Victorian England wants their worldview back. Essentially what I was saying was that women might get too flighty and emotional if we gave them facts about what's going on inside their bodies. And yet women are so emotional. They might make the wrong decision. So we should withhold that information from them. And I was like, it's weird that it's these Catholics who, I did not like their pro-life worldview, but I was like, it is kind of strange that they're the ones that are open information. Women should study science. They should know science about exactly what goes on in the womb. We should have videos. We should have pictures. Just more information. And I was like, yeah, it is kind of interesting that it doesn't tend to play out well, in history, when there is one side that is we should withhold information. Usually it's the side that's open info. We're an open book. Ask any questions. Let's look at the science. That tends to be the side that's on the right side. So I've got to skip over my whole pro-life thing because that would be another 2 hours. So I was just in a situation where, so right after I got off the FDA category X drug, my second kid was 5 months old and I got pregnant again and I had to go back to these doctors. They were they really didn't know what to do with me. Obviously abortion was suggested. And I was telling this daughter who is now 17, I was telling her about that the other day, crazy. It's just crazy to think that was suggested. So this blood clotting disorder, it makes me very likely to have deadly clots. And, when I'm pregnant but the only medicine that was available at the time cost thousands of dollars per month after insurance. This was after insurance. And we were broke. My husband was starting a business. We were broke, that level of broke when the car breaks down and you can't fix it because the money is not in the bank. We were, yeah. Yep. we were, yep. That was relatable. We were that level of broke. And so we didn't know what to do because I was pregnant again. My life depended on this medication. But it was one of those things too. A lot of people have been in this situation. My husband made just enough by $2,000 that we didn't qualify for Medicare or Medicaid or whatever. And I was like, I just don't know what to do. And then the other thing is we had been living with my mom because we were starting a business and it was very bad. We were in a very bad financial situation. So we had to move in with my mom and we were now officially out of room. 2 kids in her house was a lot. 3 was this isn't working anymore. And I just sat there and I was like, we have no money. Let's see the exact cost at that time. Let's say it was $986. I think that's right. $986 per month for this medicine that I needed. So I needed that and we had no house. And even if we did have a house, we had no way to furnish it because we had lived in a loft in downtown Austin and we had moved straight there in with my mom. We did not have furniture if we even did get a house. And so I was like, oh, is this where I should pray to God? Because I had thought when I converted that it would be I thought it would be kind of like being an atheist, but with less free time on Sundays. Thus far, I thought of my conversion as an intellectual thing. My regular podcast listeners will be like, yes, we believe that you were analytical and in your head about this completely. And it was like, oh, I think I'm going to have to actually trust God. I came across this quote that I kind of knew was for me, that Blessed Mary Elizabeth Hesselblad or whatever, nice way to talk about basically a saint. She was like, Lord, I don't ask to see the path in front of me. I'm just going to close my eyes and and I trust you to lead me. And I was like, oh man, when I realized that God was kind of sending me that quote, I was like, oh, I didn't sign up for this. Like, come on. This is like, being Catholic is like a worldview. Like, I can't, come on, what, I'm going to like trust God? Like, I can't even see God. I don't even know if I'm praying right. Like, come on. And this is right when we were like becoming Catholic, receiving First Communion. This is all in the midst of that. So I was like, look, I'm in this mess because I'm trying to do this Catholic thing. Obviously, we didn't use contraception, you know. And listen, the Catholic Church does not say that you have to have like 1 million kids. You can use natural family planning to space out pregnancies. We just didn't learn that. We were using like the Fulwiler guesstimation method. That has like a 10% effectiveness rate. It's not, you know. And when people are like, well, that's the same, it's Catholic contraception if you can use natural family planning. If it's exactly the same, why aren't you guys using it? It's not the same because it's a sacrifice-based system. It is totally fundamentally different psychologically. But so yes, you can avoid pregnancy. I want to be very clear. I did not, it's not like, oh, this is the worst time ever to have a kid. Let's go for it. What the Catholic Church does not say that. And, whatever. It was just, we just didn't know a lot about natural family planning. And again, huge, like, it's a great blessing. I don't believe in Planned Parenthood. Sometimes people are like, you shouldn't say that about your kid. I don't believe in Planned Parenthood. Like, again, if you're engaging in the act that creates babies might come along. This should not be a shock to you. So whatever, like, okay. So, I was in a whole mess. And I was like, well, God, so I've got a $986 a month medicine that I can't afford, and I need a house. And even if we had a house, like, we can't afford like lawn equipment. Like, we didn't have a lawn in our loft. We don't have furniture. And so I told God, I was like, fix this. Amen. I didn't know how to pray. I was new at all of this. On the way back from Mass, right as we were becoming Catholic, there was a construction detour. It sent us through a neighborhood. We drove by a house that had a for sale by owner sign on it. So we called, like, from our cell phones, we just called, and the guy said, oh, it's so crazy. I just put out this sign like 2 hours ago. And we said, well, we're in front of your house, which is hopefully not creepy at all. Like, can we come see it? So we walked in, and it was so perfect. It was small, like 1,900 square feet, 3 bedrooms, but the layout was like, if I had personally designed a house, this is what I would have designed. And he said, he turned to us and he said, I hope this isn't an inappropriate or crazy thing to say, but I feel like you guys being here is an answered prayer. And he had gotten a really big job up in Dallas, and he wanted to unload this house quickly. We got this house so cheap that our mortgage company required a notarized affidavit saying that we did not have a previous relationship with this owner, because they did not believe that the deal, they didn't believe the deal we got. They thought we were doing something like under the table. And by the way, that is the house we still live in to this day. We have 6 kids, 1,900 square feet. It's not very clean. Needs some upgrades, but yeah, to this day, we still 22 years later, 20 years later, we still live in that house. That house has been such a gift to us, like the greatest gift from God just ever, other than my family. But then it was like, okay, we have a house. But again, I didn't know. I gave God an itemized list. Like he's a ship's shopper. I was like, God, I need a couch. I need a coffee table. We need a bed. We need a refrigerator. We need a washer dryer, and we need lawn equipment. Get that. I swear, hand on my Bible app. This is all, what I'm about to say is all true. The guy who we bought the house from, again, he was so excited about his new job. He was like, I just want to get out of here. He gave us all of his lawn equipment. We did not ask. He just said, oh, by the way, is this going to be duplicate? Because I'm leaving my weed eater and lawnmower and all that. Then my dad got an incredible job. It was like his dream job. He was an engineer, and he was going out to Grand Cayman Island, tough life. He got a fully furnished apartment for a multi-year job. And he didn't care about his furniture in the little rundown apartment he'd been living in. And again, this was like a nice, fully furnished place in Grand Cayman. And he called me and he was like, hey, do you have any use for a couch, a coffee table, and a bed?
Yes.
It was like insane. Then, and again, we did not tell anyone about these needs. Listen, my husband went to Yale. How are we this broke, So we didn't tell anyone. Then my mom was like, hey, my appliances don't match. And like, she'd gotten a promotion and like her job, she was like, I want to upgrade my life. I've had these same appliances forever. And like, they're a different color than some of my other appliances. She said, would you be willing to take my refrigerator and washer dryer? It was like a checklist. Just everything we needed was given to us. And there's an old Italian saying that every baby comes with a loaf of bread under its arms. And I will just say, we went on to have 6 babies in 8 years. Nothing has ever been more true. I can't explain it and I can't prove it to you, but God always provides when you have a baby, especially if you're having babies in tough circumstances. But anyway, I also want to say the point is not that like, if you come to faith and you decide to believe in God and you become Catholic, that you can give God a laundry list of things and he ticks them off. Because listen, the comedy millions are not here yet. So it's not like that. This always works. Because I tried it again. I'm like, God, I need to be like a rich and famous comedian. And like, he didn't do it. So my point is not that like, when you become Catholic, you get to give God a list. The point was that I think God knew that I needed a mental breakthrough to see that you can actually count on him in a real way in your life. And ever since then, like every decision I've made in my career, has been guided by God because I trust him in a real way. And look at how well that has gone. Like I got dropped by my agent and my manager in the same day, So maybe everyone's like, oh, we were actually going to convert. And then you said that. And we're like, no, I think actually we're going to become atheists. We're going to stay atheists. But God knew that I needed to learn to trust him in a real way. And so I'm going to conclude with 2 things. We are wrapping up. So this medicine that I needed, sometimes they'd give me samples. So I went down to the pharmacy and, I looked extra disheveled. I made sure it was like right when the kids would be overtired. So like screaming and crazy. And so I thought they would take pity on me and give me the samples, but they do have to confirm that you have a prescription. So I was like, here's my name, date of birth, everything. And before I had a chance to say I need samples, the girl typed it up and she said, let's see, it was a $50 copay for a month's supply. Again, it should have been $986. And she said it's a $50 copay. And I said, I was tempted to like take it and run, but I was like, no, I think it's more, and I don't want to have to deal with the paperwork. So I said, it's not, and I'm just here to get samples. And she's like, it is right here on my screen. This is a $50 copay. So I was like, okay. And I got a month's supply of the medicine. I like ran out. I was afraid they were going to chase me down, So, like I walked out of the pharmacy and I was like, God, was that you? Like, I wasn't sure. Like after all of this, the house, the furniture, I was like, was that God? I don't know. And then, so then my husband got a really good situation at work. His work fundamentally changed. We got a major answered prayer, and it wasn't like a ton more money, but it was just a great work-life balance situation. It helped him just be in dad mode so much more. It was so much less stressful. And again, the money wasn't significantly different, but the big thing was we got different insurance. And this insurance, which would start the next month, I'm sorry to go into this detail, but stick with me because it's a good story. The insurance that would start the next month covered covered this medicine, and let's say it was like $80. It was like, let's say it was $80 a month. And so that was a massive answered prayer. This situation came out of the blue, different insurance, and it was covered. So I figured the previous insurance, the one that for whatever reason it had been $900 and then suddenly it was $50. I was like, you know what? We need to save a few bucks. So I'm just going to go back to the store. Track with me here. I went back to the store before the new insurance kicked in. So under the old insurance, which was $50, I was like, I'll just get one more refill because it's like, it'll be $80, whatever. Not a big deal, but it'll be $80 when the new insurance kicks in. So I go in with this old insurance that I'd had for years that was about to be out. And I said, I'll do another month's supply. This was a month after my previous interaction. And the guy types in my info and he whistles. He's like, whew, okay, $986. Like, that's crazy. And I said, no, I know. I thought it was, but it was, it's 50 for some reason. Like it was last time I was here. And he was like, no, I'm looking at it. It's $986. And I said, no, I know you'd think, but I said, well, look at my last transaction. He types and he types. I'm at the same pharmacy that I was at before. He said, ma'am, we have no record of that transaction. Would you all just convert to Catholicism right now? Like, come on. That's crazy. So again, and I know, the atheists are like, well, what about, people who have bad things happen? Listen, bad things have happened to me since then. Like, it is not the case that like you go believe in God and ask him for things and like your life is super blessed. And I learned this from like our friends who are immigrants from Mexico, and like they grew up in a level of poverty. I mean, like literally they would go down to the landfill. If you've ever seen pictures of like poverty-stricken Mexico, like children getting toys from the landfill, that was like our friends. And they were the most religious people I've ever met because they understood like, yeah, we live in this hellhole fallen world. Like, yeah, terrible things. That's the way of the world, but God is with you. And when you're willing to see it, like they're like after their father died, like their mother could sometimes only get like for dinner, it would be like a block of cheese, like this big, like as big as her palm. And like they would have to share it among 7 kids. And she'd be like, look at the bounty of the Lord. Look at this abundance. Like, so it's not about like, I wanted a Lamborghini and God gave me one. And that's what being Catholic is like. It's those blessings that I got were God. He had to show me in a big way that he is real and I can trust him. And I think it's not a coincidence that all that happened like after I'd really been like trying to get to know him for a long time. And you'll find that in the spiritual life that like it is a relationship, just like it's a relationship with anything else. And it's a relationship that you can grow in. And when you stay open and when you stay like open to love, you will see God moving. And it doesn't mean that everything always works out perfectly, but you will see God there in some really undeniable ways. And this is my final story. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. Because I have a comedy special coming out. You guys got to get in on this. This is my final story. So when we officially became Catholic, we had 3 little kids, 3 ages 3 and under. And, different denominations advocate for, adult baptism versus baby baptism. Nobody advocates for toddler baptism. And I can tell you why right there. So we had to get 3 kids baptized at once. And on the way to the morning of the baptism, we had just moved into this house that God sent us. And I was looking for something white to wear because I was goth for most of my life. And like, I only wore black. I couldn't find anything white to wear. So we just moved. I'm looking through all these drawers. And on my lips was the question. I was like, God, how did I get here? How did I become like not just a Catholic, but like as Jim Gaffigan would say, like a Shiite Catholic? Like I'm like the no contraception, like, how did this happen? And so I was literally asking God, like, how did this happen while I'm looking for clothes? And as I was asking the question before this baptism, a long, narrow box slid up to the front of the drawer, and it was my baptism candle. So my mother came from a kind of lapsed Catholic family. I knew like it was out there that I had been baptized, but it was never talked about. We did realize, like, when we were going through the rite of Christian initiation to be part of the church, we did realize that, because I was like, oh yeah, I think I was baptized. But it wasn't like, we never really thought much about that. My mother's Catholic parents, I did not really know them. They both died when I was a young child, and we never lived near that side of the family. And all of her brothers and sisters were completely, like, never went to church, never spoke of Catholicism. I was so far away from Catholicism. When I was in high school, I asked a dumb question, and someone was like, come on, Jen, is the Pope Catholic? And I had to ask, is the Pope Catholic? Like, I did not know if that was a rhetorical yes or no. I knew nothing about Catholicism. So, but before my grandparents passed away, they were from Irish Catholic culture, and they wanted their grandbabies baptized. So I was baptized. And I was just thinking about that. Like, as we went into that baptism where we're like standing in front of the congregation, and my son was being so bad. He was being so bad. He didn't know about church. Like, he hadn't spent much time in church. And the deacon was giving a speech about, like, telling us how it would go. And evidently he was like, I will ask you, what do you ask of the church for this child? And you say baptism. I was first in line of all the parents baptizing babies. Of course, because, like, God wants my life to be a sitcom. And he walks up to me, and he's mic'd up, like, this is in front of the whole congregation. He's like, what do you ask of the church for this child? But I missed the intro because my son was being bad, and I was focusing on that. And I have pretty severe undiagnosed ADHD. I didn't know. And so I thought I would give an impromptu speech. And I was about to be like, I ask that he be a man of God, strong in his faith. And Joe stops me, and he's like, baptism? Like, I thought this was a chance for us to, like, maybe share some testimony. No, we were supposed to just say baptism. It was a whole mess. And then he screamed. He hated being baptized. And he had a thing where when he would get mad at something, he would say, we threw it away. Like, if I told him to go to the timeout corner, he'd be like, we threw all the timeout corners away. Right after he was baptized, I had to carry him kicking and screaming out of the church. And he was screaming, we threw all the baptisms away. Anyway, he's a college student now, and he goes to mass on his own. Like, he goes to mass all the time. But yeah, he's screamed that we threw all the baptisms away on his baptism day. So anyway, that was maybe the coolest little message that God sent me. And I end with that to say, if you were an atheist and you were baptized Catholic, God's going to get you. Like, watch out. He's coming for you. But no, let's face it. There's not one atheist who's still listening to this. It's all my Catholic moms who were like, I knew we were right. So let me just end with a little bit of hope for you guys. There's hope for everyone, even people who weren't baptized. But, when you're baptized really anyway, I mean, my husband had his baptism moment. When you're baptized in a valid baptism moment, and we do think that, the Protestants, that's one thing they get right. Like, their baptisms. When you have a valid baptism, when I was baptized Catholic in a Catholic church, it's like, I was sealed with an indelible mark of belonging to Christ that not even an entire life as an unrepentant atheist could wipe away. And so for your kids who are, they've fallen away, but they were baptized Catholic, there is special hope for them, because just like me, they have belonged to Christ all along. And wow, 2.5 hours. That is sorry, guys. I even skipped a lot. Hit the exit. I skipped a lot, actually. This was the condensed version. So I hope God is happy. That's me sharing my story instead of doing a regular podcast episode. And you guys, I'm serious. Get on my email list, jfcomedytour.com. You'll see it'll pop up after 3 seconds. And we'll be back with a regular podcast episode next week here on the Jen Fulwiler Show.